It's time for Savings Appeal. Now, here's a question that might make you a little nervous. Are you ready to live 40 years? That's right, 40 years without a paycheck at all. Well, today we're joined by Dylan Bond. He's the owner of Bond Financial Services with tips on planning your retirement, because that's the reality. At the end of the day, you could retire at 60,
right,
live to 100, and have to manage 40 years without a dime coming in from your job.
That's right. I meet with a lot of families that are saying, well, I don't plan to live to 100.
Yeah.
And my response is this: you're better off planning to live to 100 and only live to 80 than to plan to live to 80 and end up living to 100. You want to make sure that your money lasts longer than you do. That's why we talk about 40 years.
And worst case scenario, let's say you plan on living to 100, you go when you're 80, that's just 20 extra years of income that friends and family, charitable organizations can get if you design your will correctly.
Absolutely. I mean, the bottom line is you want to be thinking about yourself first. When you do retire, the first thing you give up is a paycheck. So you need to replace that first. Then you want to take a piece of your investment assets, and you want to make sure that you're keeping pace with inflation. And then ultimately, when you do pass away, you want to make sure that all of your assets go to who you want it to go to as efficiently as possible without incorporating a lot of unnecessary court fees and things of that nature.
That inflation part's important because, let's face it, every year 3+% is the inflation rate. So if your money is not making between 3 and 5% a year, you're actually losing money.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about I know my savings account, I think I'm getting 0.1% on my money.
I made $20 in my savings account last year.
Exactly. So we call that losing money safely.
Yep.
Because your money's safe and it's not going to go backwards. But again, if inflation's growing at 3 to 5%, then obviously 15 years down the road, when a gallon of milk is about $12 per gallon, and your money's only grown $12, then you're going to have some problems.
Yeah, you're going to need your milk. Now, that being said, no matter how old you get, it's almost a sad, fortunate truth. You need to keep some of your cash in stocks. That's one of your tips.
Yeah, I mean, I predominantly focus my efforts on working with people 50 and older. And even at 50, 55, 60 years old, in my opinion, you have to have exposure in some way, shape, or form to the markets. There's different ways of doing it. For those that have no risk tolerance, there's ways you can link your interest crediting to a market index without actually being in the market. You can do that in the form of a fixed annuity with an index link, or you can do it in the form of maybe a market link CD. There's a few different products out there that do link performance to a market index where you can get some of the upside without any of the downside. But there's usually terms and commitments that you have to understand. So it's very important to understand how they work. A lot of companies out there, they sound a little bit better than they are, and you really, before you enter into any contract that might last 5 to 10 years, you want to make sure you're doing the right thing with that piece of money. For those that are a little bit more risk tolerant, I'm not a big believer in buy and hold investment strategies. I'm not a big believer in mutual funds for people with 50,000 or more. I think that they're expensive, and I think that riding the roller coaster up and down is not the way to go. I'm more for active management, where you're trying to participate in as much of the upside as possible and trying not to participate in as much of the downside as possible. I think when you do that, you're going to get less volatility, a potential for a better rate of return over time, and more good night sleeps,
and it's also
good night's rest.
It's also all about that diversification too. And if you're not doing it yet, you've got to do it. The sleeps thing was fine.
Yeah,
I liked
fine.
it. But diversification's important, because if you have all your eggs in one basket, that basket tips over, you're in trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we work with families. A lot of times we're working with their life savings, their nest egg, and we don't want to put all their eggs in one basket. So we're using a lot of different types of accounts to meet their objectives. For income planning, we're using specific accounts and strategies. For growth planning, we're using a specific accounts and strategies. And for healthcare hedging, we're using specific accounts and strategies. So we're spreading the money out there and around, but what we're trying to do is, no matter what happens in their lives over the next 40 years, we want to make sure that there's a plan in place, rather than having them react
out of
to
time.
it and
Yeah.
run out of time. Exactly.
Now, Dylan, unfortunately, we're out of time, but
Okay.
if people like dinner, if people like saving some of their money, you have seminars.
Yep, I try to do about 4 per month, and really, you know, we have some coming up in Enfield at Angelina's Restaurant on Hazard Avenue. We're putting some more on the calendar out in Southwick and as well as in Longmeadow. And they start at 6 o'clock. I talk for about 45 minutes, just talking about all the things that I see out there. I've been doing this for 20 years now. I've learned a lot from the people I work with.
And then people get to have a nice meal.
And they have a nice meal. And as spring comes up for the golfers out there, we also do those same seminars at Twin Hills Country Club, where we can do the same presentation and then turn them loose for a round of golf. So
sounds like a good time.
yeah,
Dylan,
call
thanks.
George for details.
Call George for details.
Absolutely.
And that number, 413-754-4747.